Oh, come on. This again? Another Mark IV? And welcome back. This is a 2000 Volkswagen Jetta TDI, and it was pretty much free. That's right, this car was pretty much free. So here's the deal. Last year I bought a 2003 Volkswagen GTI with a 24-valve VR6, and that car was an absolute disaster. This car, however, is less of a disaster and was even cheaper. And it's an ALH TDI, in my opinion, one of the best engines Volkswagen has ever made. Now, with that out of the way, this thing has some problems that we need to address immediately before I even think about driving this car full time. So let's go for a drive, because it's a little rough. So before we get going, I want to make a couple notes. This car seems to idle anyway really, really well. It sounds great, it's really tight, it starts right up, like we're talking half a crank, this thing is running, and it's like 25 degrees out here, so that's a really good sign. Now, it does only have 174,000 miles on it, which is actually pretty low for one of these, and it has a check engine light, the brake warning light's on, and it has, the biggest bummer yet is this right here, the automatic transmission, which I'm not a fan of in the slightest. It's probably the worst part of this car. Now, before I take off, I'm going to plug in VCDS, we'll scan this thing up and see exactly what's going on with it. Fault codes, mass air, and EGR. So what we're going to do is pull up the requested mass air reading versus the actual mass air reading and see how they vary. I know that the mass airflow sensors on these engines can be very problematic. When they're failing, it causes some weird symptoms like surging, massive power loss. It feels like the turbo isn't actually doing anything, and a lot of times it gets misdiagnosed as the turbo itself, which is kind of wild. But we're going to see what our live data shows and go from there. So air mass specified and actual, specified, actual. Okay, right off the bat, you can see a problem here. Specified is 355 and actual is 160. These numbers aren't going to be perfect, but they should be a lot closer than that. So what we're going to do is get a graph going and see how these two lines interact with each other. Now the green line is the actual and the red line here is specified. So let's go for a drive and see what happens with these two lines. Okay, so even though I've been 200 feet, somehow the actual reading is doing the opposite of what the computer is hoping or looking for out of the mass air. So yeah, I would say our mass airflow sensor is definitely bad, and this car is an absolute turd. Now, partially because of that automatic transmission, but I'm flooring it right now. And this is it. It's hilariously slow. Also, another thing to note is our speedometer isn't reading at all. It's just nothing. Watching our two graphs, the red line has spiked quite a bit, whereas our green line, our actual reading, is staying really, really, really low. And I can tell, because again, this car is extremely slow, like dangerously slow. Now, apart from the flat spotted tires and the terrible brakes and the rust and everything else, this is actually a very nice little car to drive around. It's pretty tight, it's quiet, it handles perfectly, which is kind of shocking. You know, it's not a bad place to start with a project like this, but we have a lot of work to do to the drivetrain, and that's where I want to talk about my plan for this thing as a whole. So in this video, I'm going to try and alleviate the issues with the engine to get it running right and figure out why the speedometer isn't reading, figure out why the engine is so gutless and powerless, probably the math, and then we'll go from there. My ultimate goal with this car is to do a hyper-mile build where we take this, our baseline, our automatic bone stock TDI, and then throw some stuff at it and see how that affects the MPG. Because currently it's gonna be pretty bad. The 4-speed auto is not geared half as well as the 5-speed, even in stock form, but my plan ultimately is to 5-speed swap it and add a longer 5th gear. We're gonna upgrade the injector nozzles to get some more power out of this engine, and by doing that, it seems counterintuitive, but the engine should be more efficient, and by making it more efficient, it'll actually use less fuel to go the same speed as before. So bigger nozzles, a longer 5th gear, manual transmission, and the cherry on top is a remap of the ECU software. So this car should be a completely different animal at the end of this video series, but right now, it's a turd. So let's get back to the garage and see what's going on here. Apart from the addition of my $35 scrapyard battery, I really haven't spent too much time under the hood of this car. So we're gonna discover all this together. Now this is it, the ALH 1.9. There it is, scrapyard battery, not much to look at. But again, for $35, you can yell at me all you want. It has a 1-year warranty, and even if it lasts 12 months in 1 day, for 35 bucks, what the hell? Now up here is the mass airflow sensor that's on the side of the airbox. You can see it right there with the plug on the side. We're gonna switch that out and see how that affects our reading via VCDS in a bit. Now moving on from that, we have our N75 valve right here, and under the coolant lines right there is the N18 EGR controller valve. Now the N75 valve uses vacuum to control the vane actuator on the turbo, so if that stops working, we don't have any boost. But I don't think, and as bad as the vacuum lines look, that's a problem, at least not right now, because according to VCDS, our boost requested and boost actual are very, very, very close, to the point where I think everything's working as it should be. However, the N18 solenoid right there is possibly an issue, because this here is our EGR valve assembly, and here in a bit we will take a vacuum pump and see if this thing holds vacuum and kind of work our way out from there. I'm imagining that the valve itself is stuck because of carbon buildup from the EGR itself. So that's that. Moving along, the coolant bottle looks pretty rough, as does the fuel filter. It looks like it's seen better days for sure. Now apart from that, the engine's kind of dirty. The dipstick tube isn't the correct one for the application. The dipstick itself doesn't even fit down in the tube, but that's something we can replace very easily and cheap. Apart from that, everything looks pretty good. There's definitely some signs of mice maybe. There's some, foliage down there and just crap. Just crap. You can see it kind of down there around the thermostat housing and on top of the alternator. And the big giveaway is over here on top of the transmission. There's some pretty obvious like needles and leaves and stuff that wouldn't otherwise be there if it wasn't for mice. This harness right here looks like it's seen some action. There's tape on it. I don't know why. I don't know why there's tape on that. Oh, it's definitely been chewed on. Even if this harness has been chewed on, it ultimately doesn't matter, because this transmission is going away, as is all the wiring for it, because our 5-speed doesn't require any of that stuff. But yeah, somebody has been chewing on that harness. Whoa, speaking of chewed on the harness, look at this. I don't know if you guys can see that or what, but these wires are chewed right in half. And that goes down to, yes, the speed sensor. All 3 wires are just chewed right in half on the speed sensor. So there is the source of our non-existent speedometer. Thank you, mouse, wherever you are, you little bastard. Now, apart from the chewed up wires, everything else down here looks pretty good. And again, it's dirty and crusty, but this car has been sitting for the last 4 years. All the coolant fittings look like they're in pretty good condition. Nothing's leaking, which is kind of wild. I mean, maybe seeping a little bit down there around the oil filter housing. But apart from that, I mean, honestly, it looks pretty good. I do know the oil was last changed at a quick lube place like 5 years ago, so who knows what's actually in this engine, but that's okay. We'll switch it out with some Motul and a nice Hengst oil filter, and we'll go from there. So let's get to work. I suppose while I'm in here, I should have a little look at the air filter and see just what we're working with. All right. Oh, it looks new. It's real fresh. Okay, that's fine, that can stay. This is a budget car. There we go. So this plug is the coolant temperature sender, and it's in good shape. These three pathetic wires are for the speed sensor. Gonna be fixing those. Getting cut short by the weather. My yellow Rabbit pickup is parked outside and it's supposed to start snowing in the next 20 minutes. So I need to get this thing out of here, get that back in. That means I haven't gotten the oil changed yet, but everything else I've gotten wrapped up. So replacement MAF is in. I fixed the wiring down to the speed sensor, took a look here at the timing belt. It's old, but looks okay for now. And then, yeah, the oil change was the one thing I didn't get to, but who cares? Let's go for a drive and see what happens. It's just starting to snow, just barely. I mean, it's like 36 degrees, so it's almost too warm. But anyways, car's running, check engine light's still on. Let's open up VCDS and see what we have code-wise. Select engine. Okay, this is saying mass air implausible signal. Clear code. Yes. Done. Go back. Advanced measuring values. Air mass specified and actual. Hey, look at that. It's actually reading right now. So I'm curious to see if I go for a drive, if that stays off. I don't think it will because there was also an EGR fault as well, but hopefully this has fixed our mass air problem. Fingers crossed. Also, let's see if that speed sensor works now. Oh yeah, it's already reading. Look at that. Good deal. All right, so we got speed now, and the mass air is doing its thing. Red line and green line are pretty well acquainted. All right, I'm gonna keep driving and I will report back if anything changes. Now, obviously I don't want to curse anything, but I think last night's repairs went pretty well. I ended up driving this thing almost 40 miles without any faults or lights popping up on the dash. I monitored the entire trip via VCDS and everything fell perfectly within range. So I think we got her fixed for a free MAF and some wiring that I had just laying around here in the shop, which is pretty cool. Now, tonight, I want to change the oil, so I didn't get a chance to last night, and look at the brakes because they're scary, like really scary. Also, I want to fix this because not only is it ugly and embarrassing, it makes a lot of noise. Last part of this video, I want to establish a mileage baseline with the automatic transmission before I do the swap. I want to see what this thing gets as it sits. So I'm driving up to visit my buddy Ricky and Matt. They're about 2 hours away, and there's like 3 different ways I can go. So to go there, it's like half state routes, like 55 to 35 through small towns. And then the last part of that drive is on the interstate. And then coming home, it's all interstate. So we'll see either way what this car gets. So averaging 60 and then averaging like 70 or 75 coming home. So we'll do it both ways, but until then, I'm gonna fill this thing up, zero out the trip, and we're gonna hit the road. There, almost 100 miles down. Gonna get fuel soon and see what our mileage looks like. Okay, here we are at Sheetz. Been 118.8 miles, and this is where we are on the fuel gauge. Now this is very mixed driving, probably 50 miles at like 55 miles an hour, and the rest probably at 75. 2.9 gallons. Okay, so 2.9 gallons to go 118.8 miles. Do the math here. 118.8 divided by 2.9. 40.96 miles per gallon. That's honestly pretty good. I didn't think the automatic would even do that well, so yeah, I'm pretty stoked, honestly. That's pretty good. Really can't complain at all. Well, guys, I think that wraps up this episode. In the next one, we're gonna tear this car apart, get rid of the automatic transmission, swap in a manual 5-speed, you know, refresh a ton of stuff on the engine itself. And we're gonna do this test again. I'm gonna do the exact same route to my buddy Ricky and Matt's and just see what it does then. But our baseline with the automatic, 40.96. So we'll call that 41. All right, we'll see you in the next one. Oh, come on. Oh, come on. Again? Another Mark IV? Oh, really? Another Mark IV?